Monique Rodriguez, founder of Mael Organics and author of the new book, The Glory in Your Story, Activating a Fearless Faith to Change Your Life, Your Career, and the World, which is out this month. Welcome, Monique.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so I'm so interested in talking to you because, number one, you have this book out, which we're going to talk about, but I'm so interested in wealth generation and the beauty business, the wellness business. And this audience is super interested in building generational wealth, and you've accomplished so much of that. And so I'm interested in your take on something. So I'm going to start here. Like, where do you believe this industry, beauty and wellness, fits in our opportunity to create generational wealth in our communities?
Yeah, I think it's a huge white space opportunity because I feel that the trajectory of beauty in general is headed for overall wellness holistically. And I think that as consumers, we are looking at, how do we take care of our overall bodies that will eventually be a reflection of our outward appearance. So everything that we put into our bodies, our skin, our hair, our nails is a reflection of like how well we take care of ourselves. So I think that, if I can talk to any aspiring entrepreneurs that is looking to tap into this space and create generational wealth, I would say like identify what is that need or that void because there's always a void in the market, right? And I don't believe in a saturated market. I feel that there's always something that someone is not doing, that you have that special spark or
Mm,
innovation that you can bring to the industry. But you just got to figure out, and sometimes it takes for you to be still to figure out like what that innovation spark is that you can bring to this space. Because I can speak from that because that was definitely like my story. I saw a void in the beauty space, in the hair space actually, the void of there was a lack of relatability, there was a lack of access to high quality products that really focus on ingredients, and there was a lack of education on how to actually use the products because I felt myself as a product junkie was going through so many different products because I didn't really understand how these products worked and performed for my hair texture
yeah.
because curly natural hair is a different texture, it's very unique, and it takes a special type of product, it takes a special type of technique in order to navigate dealing with textured hair, which makes it really what makes it really special. But that was a void that I said, well, I can take my nursing background, the educational science background of what I'm doing, apply that to what I love and the passion that I have for hair. And I can relate to people in a way that most brands at that time couldn't relate to people because I was a consumer myself. So
Yeah.
they were not the consumer. They were just kind of putting products out there and talking at consumers versus, bringing the consumers in on this journey with them and making them feel like they were a part of it. So that was a spin that I saw in the market, and that was the void that I filled. So when I think about entrepreneurs entering into the beauty and wellness space, identify like what is that void? What is that problem that you feel that you can solve and do it better than anyone in your competitive landscape, and you roll with that.
And so you said a couple of things that I want to go a level deeper on because I've seen so many entrepreneurs start or have an idea about something, and then when they realize that there's other people in the market, no matter because they've heard, you can still do the thing, but for whatever reason, it's discouraging. And so, what do you
Mhm.
feel is like typically the reason for that discouragement, and how do we get past that? I hear you say, figure out your innovation, and I've heard people say that, but people still get discouraged when they realize
Mhm.
there's others in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of different reasons why people get discouraged. I think one of the reasons is lack of funding and
Mm,
lack of access to funding and lack of resources. And I think that we may tend to get discouraged because we are trying to tackle this mountain head on. We're starting at the top instead of like taking small little steps to climb this mountain to get to the
yeah,
top.
that's so good.
And so when you look at the mountain and you're down at the bottom and you're like, I got to do all this
Yeah,
and it's going
yeah,
to require all of this. And I don't know how I'm going to get the equipment to climb this mountain. Then you start getting into your own head And then that's when the discouragement and the fear and the doubt sets in,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
creeping in, because now you've opened the door to it, because you are not looking at, okay, this is something that I'm going to tackle with little small steps in
Yeah.
order to get to the top. You looking at the top and trying to backtrack and figure out how you're going to put all this together to get there. So I think that's what contributes to a lot of people's discouragement. And that's why entrepreneurship, I feel, is one of the biggest faith journeys
Yeah.
that you can go on, because it is the fear of you stepping out on faith. The fear
Yeah.
of like normalcy and comfortability. For me, I left my stable, good paying job to start something that I didn't know how it was going to go. Didn't know if customers were going to buy from me, didn't know if our income was going to go down,
Yeah.
because now we have no nursing income that I was dependent on. So it was a lot of different factors that will cause you to be like, okay, is this really worth me stepping out, or should I just stay comfortable and stay safe, because
Yeah.
this is what feels good and it's not scary. It's like, I know it's I can predict. Well, we can't never predict anything,
Yeah.
but we feel like when we're in a safe space that we can predict, right? But um it's not really stability when you're not fulfilled.
Mm.
So I think that's what, discourages a lot of people, because we get in our own way. We set the limits on ourselves when I feel that we operate with a God with no limitations. So once we take the labels and the limits off, then we can fully just flourish and thrive with whatever dream or desire we have.
Man, that just spoke to me. So yes, I'm gonna have to listen back to this to remind myself of that. Um, and so I've seen so many people building shea butter companies, hair
Mhm,
companies, lotion companies, etc. And so many get stuck at the kitchen, which is a great place to start, but they get stuck
mhm.
there. Can you talk about what you would do today if you were starting over again, knowing what you now know about how to successfully start, that may be helpful to some of these brands?
Yeah, I feel that sometimes what stops small businesses from scaling to different levels is sometimes that person. I think entrepreneurship, it comes with a spirit of humility, and I've seen several entrepreneurs that get in their own way because they feel like they know everything. They don't like to listen, and I think listening is very important. I mean, especially listening to people that have gone down the path that you're looking to go. I mean, people that have not necessarily been down that path, you may want to have discernment with listening to them or whatnot. But having a spirit of humility and asking the right questions, surrounding yourselves with the right mentors, it was a huge part of my success. And outside of like the funding, like I know funding is um a huge undertaking for small businesses and entrepreneurs, and that's a huge stumbling block, but it's not something that you can't cross that obstacle,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
We've gone through funding challenges, and it just takes for you to get out there, network, and connect with the right people. But I feel that a lot of people get stuck in that space of just operating from their kitchen, because they're not putting in what they want to get out of it. Like, it's gonna, whatever you put into it is what you're gonna get out of it. And that's gonna take you getting out here grinding, getting out here going to networking events, meeting people. It's gonna take you also spending money. And sometimes you will be
Yeah.
spending money that you don't have. Um, but that's the risk. Everything comes with the risk. You have to take calculated risk, but on the other side of the risk is the reward. And I just feel that like people just like nobody's gonna know about your business if you don't get out there and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. That's a fact.
And you gotta travel, and because my husband and I, we would travel everywhere. We would go everywhere to talk about our business. We did events big and small because we wanted to get the brand out there. And sometimes it just takes you getting out of your own way and put yourself out there and just, go for it, and not caring about what people think about how you're gonna look.
I love that. I love that. There's a quote I found where you said, the glory in your story, you wrote that to encourage others to see beyond their circumstances and tap into the inner strength. Um, and you also said winning in life and business requires a kind of risk taking that many are afraid to embrace. And I hear you saying so many things along those lines. And I want you to talk about, if you can, remember some of the most riskiest decisions you've made and how you move through those things and how you move past the fear that keeps most people from going past.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you several examples of like just risks that we took throughout the journey. I mean, the first risk, like I talked about earlier, was leaving my career, safe, comfortable. I was getting
Yeah.
a paycheck every 2 weeks. I knew that paycheck was coming. And the risk was, if this doesn't take off, I'm not gonna have a job. Granted, I have a nursing license, so I had something to fall back on, but you know, that was still a risk of like just putting that career aside. And then when my husband left his job, that's when it really got real because he came from corporate. So, it's not easy to just go get a corporate job. So, with both of us leaving our careers was a huge risk. But we focused on the vision God gave us, and we knew that we had to plan. Like, we didn't just leave our jobs and say, oh, we don't have a plan in place or we don't have income. We had to have a solid plan in place to map out like how we were going to get some type of income to still keep our bills afloat and our food in our kids' mouth. So we had to like plan that out. But it was a huge risk of like the unknown of like both of us turning away from our jobs. We had the risk that we took when we entered into retail. That was a huge risk because retail is a whole different beast. And if your brand does not perform in retail, it can be very detrimental to your business because if you don't perform and you have to come out, that is not a cost to the retailer. That is a cost to you
Mm,
as the brand. And depending on how many stores you're in, that can be millions of dollars that if your brand doesn't perform, that you will have to pay that retailer if you don't sell or turn in those stores.
wow.
That's a huge risk because, it's like we believe in our brand, but the what if? What if it didn't sell? And then we take on this huge undertaking, and do we have over $1 million to pay back at that time? No, we didn't. The risk of when we got a line of credit, when you're going to get a line of credit and you're a small business, like you don't have banks that are just trying to throw money at you. They're
Yeah.
very cautious because what they want to know is how you're going to be able to pay it back and what type of assets you have that we can use as collateral. So the risk was we had to put our house up for collateral, the house that we live in, the house that we raise our family in. And if that line is called due, what happens next? They take your house. That was a huge risk. The risk of taking on investment and not knowing that this investment partnership was going to work. Are we going to be able to perform and grow the business to scale so we can get these investors their return back on their investment? So everything that we did was a risk,
Yeah.
but we focus on like what is the reward on the other side of it and with proper planning. So the risks that we take, we also make sure that we do the proper planning in place to identify like what are the odds or like what is in our favor if it does work. And that's why I say you have to calculate your risk because everything that you do pretty much is going to be a risk. And I always say this to my kids, everything that you do is going to be hard. You have to choose your hard. I could have chose the hard of still working as a nurse, paycheck to paycheck, struggling financially, trying to provide for my family and going to work every day, miserable on my feet for 12 hours,
Yeah.
not getting sleep. That's hard. Or I can take the hard of grinding, building a company, taking red eye flights, taking the risk of being criticized by my own people in my community, having to have thick, tough skin. You know, it's hard building a business, not knowing if you're going to receive a return on what you're building and what you're grinding for. It's still hard, but which one is both of them are hard, but you got to choose your heart. Everything that we do in life is going to be hard.
Yeah. I'm interested in your take on this because I've seen, and I'm not going to ask you a political question, but what I have seen is with all these issues, people saying, well, why not just sell your product, direct to consumer? Why not just build a website and do that? And so my question is, what is the reasoning for going retail that people may not understand when they just say, well, just put up a website and, tell people to buy it from there?
Yeah, well, the retail is national exposure, right? That's what it helps with. It helps with brand awareness. Mayo became a global beauty brand because of our retail partners, because of that exposure. When you're in Target, Sally's, CVS, Walmart, we were in over 100,000 stores. When you are just operating online, not saying that you won't be successful, you will be successful, but the amount of scalability and the amount of eyeballs and people that come in contact with your brand, it's not the masses, because you're speaking to your own community. The people that come to your
Hmm.
website, they're in your own community and your own ecosystem. Whereas people discovered our brand, a lot of people discovered our brand by just going into the retailers. Had never heard of our Instagram, had never heard of our website. They heard of us by going into the retail store. And then they look us up.
Yeah.
Then they go to our social media and website, and then they enter into our ecosystem. But I feel the what the difference is what's in my own ecosystem versus the masses. And so when I want the masses to know about the brand, that's where retail partnership comes into play.
How do you build infrastructure, inventory, supply chain, fulfillment before you get major funding, if possible?
Yeah, it's possible. It's very hard. Um, we were fortunate enough in the very beginning to bootstrap our company, and we had very high profit margins that allowed us to just continue to reinvest as we built infrastructure and scale to our point where we got into Sally's. When we entered into Sally's, the thing when you go into retail is that inventory that they place the order for, you as a brand, you are paying for that inventory up front before it goes into the retailers. And then when it gets to the retailers, then you have to wait for them to pay you. And
Mm.
sometimes, depending on the retailer, it can take 60 days, it could take 90 days, it could take 4 or 5 months
Yeah,
before you get that payment. So you
that's
have to
true.
have some type of operating capital. So when we decided that we were going to test out in 95 retail stores, and that was a small amount, and we needed funding even then for that small amount to enter into those 95 stores because we had to pay for that inventory. We took out a very small loan from a friend of my husband's that was an entrepreneur that believed in us, that believed in our vision, and he gave us a loan for like 200,000. Now I look back, it wasn't a lot, but that loan was very expensive, right? Because
Hmm.
when we did have a exit, they made a lot of money just off of that small loan, but we needed it at the time,
Hmm.
and no banks were going to give us the funding to get into the stores to fund that inventory. So we were fortunate enough to have that. And then with my husband having a background in logistics and operations, we were able to like build up, I would say, a baby operations and infrastructure to support us into retail until we started to bring in more money, to bring in more people that had the experience and expertise to help develop infrastructure and operations that prepared us for scale before we took on investment funds.
So I'm interested in why this book, why now, the glory in your story, activating a fearless faith to change your life, your career, and the world. So let's talk about why you decided to write this book.
Yeah, the why is, I think, like right now, especially in the world that we live in, it's like perfect timing because, I want people to look at this book and look at me as like your big sister that's giving you entrepreneurial advice. And that's pretty much giving you the roadmap to success and sharing the trials, the tribulations, the mistakes that I've made, because I want to be that person that I needed when I first started my business. There was no Monique Rodriguez or
Hmm.
Melvin Rodriguez that I can look to
Hmm.
when I started my company. There were no mentors. To be honest with you, I had to search for mentors that were entrepreneurs and started up brands from their kitchen or their house, from other places and
Yeah.
other people that didn't look like me,
Yeah.
right? And I want to be able to change that narrative, and I want black and brown people to now have an example, a big sister that they can look to and
Yeah.
say, I want to do what she's done. I want to do it even better. But she's going to be my big sister to give me the roadmap and share her learnings, all while sharing her journey of faith, because I think it all starts with a solid foundation that's going to help set them up to do even greater in their careers.
Yeah, I love that comment because I saw it. You had said that before. I wanted to be the person that I didn't have in this space, and there's so many of us who look for representation
Mhm.
with the journey we might be on, and hoping we can find somebody who looks like us, comes from areas we might come, communities we might come from, and we don't find it. And so I
Mhm.
wonder, like, for those people like yourself and others who are doing this for others because you didn't have it, where do you go for that strength? Because you're the first in many ways through the door, and you're being for others what you didn't have, but you got to make it
Mhm.
also, you have to find that strength.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so funny because someone just asked my husband that like last week. And we are very intentional about finding those people. And we have a lot of friends that are older than us, a lot of successful friends that are older than us that we have met along this journey that we glean to and that we learn from. But it takes intentionality to go out and find and search for those people. So we're always open to meeting people that look like us, that have great success stories that may not be known to the masses, but they're known in their individual circles, that we will befriend, to just have that support system, to have that mentorship, and to have those examples. Because, you know, I still find myself like seeking and trying to find those people. I have a few that are close to me, and I cherish those groups of people that I have relationships with. But I'm still like always intentional about like meeting and connecting with people that I can learn from. And if our motto is, if I can't evolve from being around you, then I don't need to be involved with you.
There are a lot of comments when black companies sell. You'll see it in the comments, and like some of us don't understand exits, and so you said before you sold up, not out. And so, can you describe the distinction there, and how can we reframe the conversation around exit and liquidity for our community?
I think we reframe the conversation by number one, normalizing it and know that this is normal trajectory of businesses. M- Other cultures build businesses with the intention to exit and to sell so they can do other things. I'm going to use an example of a recent exit that was just all over the news, and it was a brand called Poppy
Yeah, yeah,
that had a
yeah.
successful exit, and I think they sold
To
to
Pepsi,
Pepsi.
that's right.
And, obviously different culture, but it was celebrated. You didn't hear all the negativity and the backlash. And they do it all the time. They build, they exit, and it's celebrated. We are the only community that thinks that building exited is something bad. And I understand why we feel that way, because we feel that way because when a brand is built for the community, we feel like it's ours.
Hmm,
It
hmm.
belongs to us. But that comes from a lack mindset. It doesn't come from an abundance mindset.
Wow,
When
that's
we
deep.
operate from a
Yeah.
spirit of lack, we feel like it's never going to be enough. We have to gatekeep, we have to keep it to ourselves because we're going to run out of it. Or if someone else comes in from a different culture and uses it, it's not going to be enough for us. That's not the mindset that God even wants us. He wants us to have an abundant mindset, to know that there's always going to be enough. We're not going to run out. Our cup will continue to overflow. So it starts with our thinking first and foremost, that when a brand is built for us, it doesn't mean that other communities and other cultures can't use what's for us. It doesn't mean that other cultures are going to come in and take from us. It just means that what we're building is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that means that what we're building is great. When a conglomerate is interested in a brand like Mael, that means that what I have built is something great for people to be interested in. So that is something that should be celebrated within our community. And what I want our community to understand is that when we don't celebrate it, what we do is we create fear in investors, we create fear in conglomerates that are going to be afraid to invest in Black businesses that are built for Black communities because they're going to be fearful of how the community is going to act if they invest
Yeah.
or if they become acquired. But then in the same breath, we complain less than 1% of women or Black women entrepreneurs have less than 1% of funding. Venture capitalists, we complain about the funding and the access that's given to us as Black community, but yet we're making the investors fearful to invest in the Black
Hmm.
community because of how the Black community tears another Black brand down for
Wow.
doing something that they have done for years. And so when we talk about creating generational wealth, how do we create generational wealth? You're not going to do it by building a business. You create generational wealth by getting your business acquired because what your business earns, that money should be going back into the business. And when you have if you are operating correctly, you should be on payroll for your
Yeah.
business and
Yeah.
you should receive a paycheck, not the profits from the business. So if you're continuing to operate on payroll, it's harder to build generational wealth operating that way. The real wealth is when you build your business and you exit and you sell it to a major conglomerate. That is how other cultures have been doing it for years. That is why we are behind because we have to catch up and become educated on why it's important to build something and become acquired.
What's in your everyday carry? Like, what is your EDC? I like to call like the things that Monique always has to have. Like, no matter if I'm leaving the house, if I'm in the car, if I'm at work, I'm in the gym, I got these things with me. Like, what are the things you always got to have? And you
I
can't
always
say your
have to
phone.
have.
You can't say your phone.
Oh well, yeah, that's. So I always have to have some water.
I got it.
Got to stay hydrated. And I always have to have my sunscreen because I think sunscreen is like you want to have great skin and not have damage and that causes you to look old. You got to have a nice good sunscreen.
Is this Mael sunscreen?
And no, we actually don't have a
Okay.
sunscreen anymore. So
What
I
you
just
can
use
give a
their
brand if you want. If you want.
right now I use Tula. I love their sunscreen. And I also use another brand called I think it's K Brown, but I could be quoting it wrong.
Okay.
Those are my two sunscreens. And then I also have to have a good lip gloss because I don't like being dry. So I would say water, sunscreen, lip gloss, and lotion.
I love it. All right, I got two more easy ones for you. Like, I want to know, how does spirituality guide your business decisions? How does your faith direct you?
Yeah, my faith is everything. And we're very vocal about my faith. My faith is what allows me to stay grounded. My faith is what allows me to um, have the confidence that I have. It has allowed me to develop, like I talked about earlier, the thick skin that I have to deal with, criticism, to deal with the naysayers. And my faith helps to drive decisions. Any decisions that we make, we always pray on it. We consult with God, and so that's how I can be as confident as I am to talk about the things that I've done because I know my internal drivers is my faith and not, you know, Monique's own ego. And don't get me wrong, sometimes my ego can get in the way, but I have to go back to being rooted and grounded and my source, and that's God, Jesus Christ. And that humbles me and keeps me at a place of humility, knowing that I don't operate in my own power, but I operate from a power that's been given to me through God and the Holy Spirit. So it's everything for me.
Know that. And finally, what's one lesson in the book you wish you knew back in 2014 and in those early days? And what's that thing that you think every founder, every person who's trying to build something should memorize, get deep within them, resonate?
One thing I would say, I mean, it's a couple of things, but I'm gonna say two. So one thing I would say is that, every success story that you see, all started with humble beginning. So don't despise humble beginning. Don't despise the fact that you're still in your kitchen and you're grinding. If you keep being consistent and have discipline, not motivation, because every day you're not going to be motivated to get up and work on your business. You're not going to be motivated. You have to have a certain level of discipline and consistency, and it will eventually pay off because discipline is going to equate the freedom that you're ultimately looking for when you are building and growing a successful business. So like focus on how can you be a more disciplined person in every area of your life, and knowing that everyone had to always start from somewhere small. And then the second thing I would say is one piece of advice that a CFO told us, and this is also in my book, is the best time to raise money is when you don't need money.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that when entrepreneurs are growing and they're in a position where they feel stuck and they don't have funding or resources, they may be quick to take on outside funding quickly on because they feel like there's no alternative and there's no way out.
yeah,
And they take on investments and they dilute their shares early on. So I always caution entrepreneurs to be careful with diluting your shares very early on, because what'll happen is by the time you do have a successful exit, let's just throw $1 billion out there. Let's say you have $1 billion exit and you have diluted your shares to own like 1% of, now you own 1% of the company. Yeah, 1% of $1 billion is still really great money.
yeah.
It's really great. But having 30% of a billion is much more lucrative than 1%. And if you can get to the point where you can at least maintain more of your company towards the end, when you start getting closer to having an exit, the greater outcome you will have in the long run. I mean, but if you're okay with having 1%, that's fine. But just know that you don't drive decisions, you don't control anything. The people that have given you that money, they're the ones that's making the decisions. So it just depends on like the type of autonomy you want to have and the type of exit you want to have in the end. For us, we kept all of our shares. We did not dilute our shares until 2020.
Wow,
We
wow.
exited in
Congratulations.
2023. Thank you. We exited in 2023. So that was 3 years. So just imagine how much ownership we had in our company when we finally exited versus just having a very small percentage. So weigh your odds, but don't be so quick to take on investments. And when you don't take on investments and money early on, it also makes you more resourceful and it makes you more scrappy. You become more creative and innovative when you don't have money.
That's a
and
fact.
and for me, I feel like not having it, I learned a lot more, and I learned how to appreciate it and respect the money and operate from a place of creativity versus if money was just handed to me, I probably would have just threw money to a lot of different places and had frivolous spending. So just be cautious.
The book, The Glory in Your Story, Activating a Fearless Faith to Change Your Life, Your Career, and the World. It's out April 15th.